And a good Thursday morning to you. Welcome into the Nick Craig Show, streaming live on YouTube, Rumble, and X 24/7, wherever you get your podcasts. Just search for the Nick Craig Show in your favorite podcast app and take it alongside with you. Wrong lower third there. Take it alongside with you 24/7, nickcraig.com if you'd like to listen online as well. Well, a big day in Washington, D.C. yesterday, Liberation Day, as President Donald Trump made his way outside of the Oval Office into the White House Rose Garden to announce something that he has been talking about a lot, talked about it through the campaign, his economic strategy as it relates to tariffs. This has been a major political discussion, and it's something that I believe is causing some serious discussions, and I wouldn't go as far as divisions. I've seen a lot of that talk, but some serious discussions within conservative factions and Republican factions and circles over the tariff conversation going forward. Yesterday, Trump announced the implementation of a 10% baseline tariff on all imports effective April 5th, so coming up here in just a couple of days. The decision, which he claims to correct the record on decades of unfair trade practices that he claims has disadvantaged American workers and American industries. Trump in the Rose Garden yesterday afternoon. This is what the president had to say during the announcement.
Starting tomorrow, the United States will implement reciprocal tariffs on other nations. It's been a long time since we even thought of that. But we will charge them approximately half of what they are and have been charging us. So the tariffs will be not a full reciprocal. I could have done that, yes, but it would have been tough for a lot of countries. We didn't want to do that. I'd like to see the chart if you have it. Could you bring it up, Howard? This is our great Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick. Thanks, Howard. So if you look at that, China, first row, China, 67%. That's tariffs charged to the USA, including currency manipulation and trade barriers. So 67%, I think you can, for the most part, see it. Those with good eyes, with bad eyes. We didn't want to bring, it's very windy out here. We didn't want to bring out the big charts because it had no chance of standing. Fortunately, we came armed with a little smaller chart. So it's 67%, so we're going to be charging a discounted reciprocal tariff of 34%. I think, in other words, they charge us, we charge them less. So how can anybody be upset? They will be, because we never charge anybody anything, but now we're going to charge. European Union, they're very tough, very, very tough traders. You think of European Union, very friendly. They rip us off. It's so sad to see. It's so pathetic. 39%, we're going to charge them 20%, so we're charging them essentially half. Vietnam, great negotiators, great people. They like me, I like them. The problem is they charge us 90%. We're going to charge them 46% tariff. Taiwan, where they took all of our computer chips and semiconductors. We used to be the king, right? We were everything. We had all of it. Now we have almost none of it, except the biggest company is coming in. We're going to end up with almost 40%. Lee Zeldin's working to get their approvals. And it's an amazing company. Mr. Wei, of one of the great companies of the world, actually. They're coming in from Taiwan, and they're going to build one of the biggest plants in the world, maybe the biggest for that. But 64%, we're going to charge them 32%. Japan, very, very tough, great people. And again, I don't blame the people for doing it. I think they're very smart in doing it. I blame the people that sat right in that Oval Office, right over there, right behind the Resolute desk or whichever desk they chose. But you see the numbers. The numbers are so disproportionate. They're so unfair. At the same time, we will establish a minimum baseline tariff of 10%. You notice that on the chart. And that'll be on other countries to help rebuild our economy and to prevent cheating. So we're going to have a minimum of cheating, and we're going to be very severe on the people that at the gate that watch the tariffs and watch the product coming in, because there's been a lot of bad things happening at the gate because the money is so enormous that you're talking about. There's never been probably anything like it in terms of the enormity, and there are a lot of bad things happen at the people that do the check-in. They're looking at 10-year jail sentences if they do play. We're going to treat them so good, but if they cheat, the repercussions are going to be extremely strong. Foreign nations will finally be asked to pay for the privilege of access to our market, the biggest market in the world. We're right now the biggest market in the world. We had a great country 4 years ago in terms of the economics. We were doubling up on China. We were doing so well. Nobody was going to catch us, but so much of it slipped away over the last 4 years under Biden. I campaigned on this policy throughout last year, and today that promise was made, and it was also a promise, as you know, that was kept. Promises made, promises kept.
Now, to the president's credit, he did, in fact, campaign on tariffs. It was a large part of his presidential campaign, and it's I can't argue it's not a promise made, a promise kept. The real question is, do the impacts of these tariffs make sense? We know that tariffs will have a huge impact on the prices that you and I pay day in and day out. We know that those tariffs are not going to be eaten up by the various companies that are importing goods to the United States. Those costs are going to be passed along to the American consumer. And one of the major questions right now, and we'll talk about this coming up with economist Dr. Vance Ginn here in just a couple of minutes, can the American consumer hold out while these tariff discussions play out? Now, it appears it's obvious what Trump is trying to do. Trump is trying to encourage and in some cases bully, which is there's nothing wrong with, but bully these other countries to lower their rate of tariffs. That's the goal. That's the objective here. He feels, and in many cases he's spot on, that the United States has been taken advantage of on the global trading scale. And there's a lot of evidence to back up that that's true and that that's exactly the case. And so in an attempt to try and lower some of the rates that are being charged by other countries, there's a lot of questions over the legitimacy of the numbers on Trump's chart there. The question is, will any of that actually change? Or maybe a better question, can the American consumer wait and hold out for those things to change? Now, I love Donald Trump. I have voted for him in every primary and every general election that he has been in since 2015. Big supporter of the president. I've been fortunate enough to interview him in the past. I've been fortunate enough to chat with members of his team and be in contact with them. Great individuals. I'm not sure this is the smartest move by President Trump. I have a strong suspicion, and you're seeing it now. The stock market has been in complete free fall over the last couple of weeks. Looking at the pre-market futures this morning, you've got the Dow down 1,200 points in pre-market, S&P down almost 200, NASDAQ futures down almost 800. So major sell-offs in the pre-markets this morning. Now, the markets, one thing they do want is certainty. And there was a lot of uncertainty leading up to yesterday afternoon. What exactly was the president going to do? What exactly were the policies going to be? So it makes sense that things were a little rocky and shaky because it was still kind of unknown exactly what things were going to look like. The market, one thing they love, even if it's bad news, they love certainty. That's what the market loves. That's where the market thrives, when there's certainty as to what's happening and what's going on. So now they have that certainty. And the question is, how is the market going to react to the certainty now that President Trump brought forward yesterday? Reciprocal tariffs on something like 50 or 60 countries, and then for everybody else, 10% across the board. That's what he announced yesterday. That's what he brought forward yesterday in the Rose Garden. And the real question is, what is the impact on you? What is the impact on the American consumer going forward? It has been a rough go at it in terms of the economy over the last couple of years, right? Nobody is going to shy away from that. Nobody is going to hide away from that. It has been really, really rough. And so the big question that I have this morning is, can Donald Trump, and can he convince the American people, can he convince his supporters, if this goes the way that many economists think it will, which will end up being a disaster for the United States economy. Can he overcome that politically? Can he restore goodwill and good faith with the American public, with the American voters, if this doesn't go the way that he wants? If everybody doesn't just come down on their tariff rates and you see prices beginning to skyrocket for American people, for American consumers, because there's a real risk of that. Now, I know that the spin that you're going to get from the White House is that, oh, well, this is not going to have a major impact on the economy and so on and so forth. That's fine. That's their spin. And we don't know whether it's going to have a major impact or not. But Econ 101 will teach you that there is a very high risk that things do not go well for this administration when you talk about these sweeping tariffs across the country. When you talk about these sweeping tariffs for the American people. And we got plenty of time to get your comments in this morning as well. You can text in this morning live at 910-377-6425. That's 910-377-6425. We'll get to your texts. We'll get to some comments on social media, some comments on the live stream, all as we roll on and continue to discuss this major decision from President Donald Trump yesterday as it relates to tariffs. In Washington, D.C., with President Donald Trump announcing sweeping tariffs. To talk a little bit about that and the impact that it could have on your and my daily lives, economist Dr. Vance Ginn joins us this morning on the Nick Craig Show. Vance, thanks for the time. As always, we've talked tariffs a couple of times over the last few months. Trump says it's one of his favorite words in the dictionary. There's a lot of uncertainty with everything announced yesterday and this overall arching policy from the administration. Give us a 50,000 square foot view of where we're at right now.
Yeah, Nick, it's always a pleasure to be with you. And look, I mean, I think that there's a lot of uncertainty that's happened over the last couple of months with tariffs being on and then off again and shifting them around. And so now we have this sort of concrete measures that the Trump administration is taking. And let's see what the business administration or the business community will take based on that sort of administrative efforts. And what we've seen, though, is more and more of a direction of doing something about trade deficits, about tariffs that other countries impose on their people, but could influence America as well. And Trump has been trying to fight back on that. There was a lot of that during the first administration as well, which I was a part of as the chief economist for the Office of Management and Budget. You know, I will say that I don't know, though, that we saw a lot of effects from those first round of tariffs during the first Trump administration. So it'll be interesting to see what happens now. But look, I think you've also seen the markets. I mean, the stock market's been down quite a bit since all these trade war and tariff talks. And let's see what happens. I'm not one who likes tariffs or thinks that we need to go down these trade war direction. But at least we have a little bit more concreteness based on this up, off again, on again sort of approach with tariffs over the last couple of months.
Vance, as I understand it, not only listening to the president yesterday, but listening to him over the last 70 days or so, one of his big sticking points is bringing production, bringing manufacturing, which of course would bring jobs back to the United States. That seems to be really the keen focus from his administration and the individuals he has surrounded himself with. Some of these discussions about these trade wars and these tariffs, when rubber meets the road, does that actually work? Does it actually happen?
That's not what we've seen historically. The economic theory is that if you tax Americans more, you're actually going to get less economic output here in America. And that's essentially what a tariff is. It's raising taxes on Americans for anything that we purchase from another country. That's what a tariff is. And so while there could be some things on the side where you get more manufacturing because we're not buying it as much from another country because there is that higher cost on purchasing it from that. There's no indication that you'll see more manufacturing at home. And what's happened, this wasn't just from more trade that we've seen kind of the hollowing out of the Rust Belt. It happened well before China entered the World Trade Organization in 2001. We've started to see employment declines in manufacturing in the 1950s and 1960s, well before that was going on. And a lot of that was because of automation and new innovation and technology that came on where you didn't need as much employment. We were much more productive in the manufacturing sector than we had been before. But there was another part of this that is often missed, is that we had very high taxes on businesses here at home. We had the highest corporate tax rate in the developed world for decades before the Trump tax cuts of 2017. And we also had a lot of high taxes and regulations in those states of the Rust Belt. And so if you have high taxes and high cost of doing business, you're going to go elsewhere. And that's exactly what manufacturing businesses did with a lot of their employment to places in the Sun Belt like Texas and Tennessee over some of those in the northern part of the Rust Belt, or in places like China or Mexico. And so I think a lot of the failed policies of the past are trying to resurrect or correct for some of those. But my concern, Nick, is that we're going in a bad direction because more government trying to solve a bad government or a government failure problem just doesn't work.
It's interesting that you bring that up. And I think if you polled 100 Americans, regardless of their political leaning, and said, would you want more manufacturing? Would you want jobs in the United States? You're likely to get a very positive result. A majority of those individuals would say yes. Vance, the question and what seems to be on a lot of people's minds is, can the middle-class American consumer wait out the effects of these tariffs, wait out the effects of these trade wars for things to potentially start declining? It's been a rough 4+ years for U.S., the middle class here in the United States. Do those people have the money in their savings account? Do they have the financial ability to hold out for another 18, 24, 36 months before some of this stuff actually takes effect?
Short answer is no. They don't have it. I mean, we were in a fragile economy at the end of the Biden administration, or most of the Biden administration anyway, because they were propping us up with fiscal policy, monetary policy, and bad regulations of nearly $2 trillion hikes on a hidden tax of regulations. And so this was a tough economy to come into. Then you have this on again, off again uncertainty from tariffs. And then you have this specific cost now of tariffs. These are all going to hit Americans, especially the middle class, hard. I mean, they can't afford what's going on with housing and other things. And now when you have tariffs on lumber from Canada, which we bring in a lot of lumber, that's going to raise the price of housing. You put a tariff on steel and aluminum, that raises the price of cars. You go through the list. These are all things that Americans buy, and middle class, lower class, upper class, however you want to think about it, they're all buying this. And this is a direct tax on them. They have to purchase, whenever they purchase these things from a foreign country, they're going to be paying the tariff of a higher tax. And that is passed along in the form of higher prices for us, or fewer jobs or lower wages. And that's not what the middle class can afford right now. And it's interesting, Nate, because this election that just passed in this past November was really a reckoning for the bad policies, the failed policies of the Biden administration to really do something about the high cost and the affordability crisis that we have across the country. And instead, what I see this is Trump doubling down on things that are going to raise prices versus us having more pro-growth policies. I'd rather see them focus more on extending and making permanent the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that expire at the end of this year than all this trade discussion and trade wars.
I want to get back to the Taxes and Job Act because I think there's a lot there. But let me ask you this as it relates to tariffs, as it relates to some of these higher prices that you're talking about. You were in Trump's first Office of Management and Budget. Trump's got a lot of smart economists around him, individuals, Vance, that you probably know and interact with. However, this seems to be the North Star here is tariffs. Everybody seems to be singing from the same sheet of music. Walk us through that process.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, you're right. I was there. I had a lot of these conversations with folks like Peter Navarro, Robert Lighthizer, and there were a lot of people who were interested in tariffs. And of course, the president, who said he loves the word tariff, and he's been writing about this since the art of the deal. I mean, he's really been about these tariffs for a long time as other countries are taking advantage of us. And so why shouldn't we have more fair trade over free trade? And my point was always that we should look internally about the cost of doing business here at home before we start blaming other countries. When we have too high of a corporate tax rate, like I still feel like we do today, even at 21%, because when you add state and local corporate taxes, we're up to 25%, which is higher than China's. It's higher than the OECD average, the developed world average corporate rate. So we're still putting at a disadvantage to many of our business and manufacturing companies in America. But the other thing is, we are hitting record highs in manufacturing output as far as GDP goes. It's just that we don't need as many workers. So should we really have this infatuation that people should be working in manufacturing? I mean, it was hard work for many people for many decades being in those manufacturing plants and having deaths and the injuries and other things that were happening, the automation actually helped to improve. It was a compliment to a lot of the people who are working in the manufacturing sector that made their work easier, that made their lives better. And so I don't know that having a increasing number of employment in the manufacturing, even as we have record output, is the direction that we should be going. But instead, we have this top-down government control. We're going to direct the resources where they should go. And that just doesn't work. It's not worked in China and other places. Yes, China has manufacturing now, but that's because they also have a very large population that's 3 to 4 times larger than ours. So you have lower wages. You also have a communist government that I think eventually they're also going to fail. So we need to be strengthening our economy based on what the markets say we should have versus what the government thinks that the market should have.
We're talking to economist Dr. Vance Ginn on the Nick Craig Show this morning. Vance, you mentioned something that's expiring at the end of this year. What do the details on that look like?
Yeah, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, TICJA, as we call it, TCJA, that's the Trump tax cuts passed in December of 2017. They expire at the end of this year, all the individual taxes. So all of your listeners who are paying a certain tax rate right now, that is to go up in January of 2026 if they do not extend or make permanent the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. There's different amounts of how much that would be and what the quote-unquote pay-fors are. But I think if we can spend less and we make the tax cuts permanent and they do the deregulation that they're already doing by Elon Musk and Doge and others, we could be in an extraordinary time of economic opportunity and growth. My concern still is that they're going to be a drag from the trade policies that are going on, that we're not going to get as much growth as we otherwise would. And the last thing on this, Nick, for this point, is that we're running $2 trillion a year in deficits. The path forward for slowing down or balancing the budget is not by raising taxes, which is what tariffs are doing. They're raising taxes on Americans, which I think puts Americans last, not first. But at the end of the day, we've got to focus on spending or none of this other stuff is going to matter. And we're going to have higher interest rates, higher inflation, and Trump is going to have a bad situation that was started a lot by the Biden administration, but they'll be doubling down on that. So we've got to get Congress to make permanent the Trump tax cuts before the end of the year.
Well, you talk about that deficit. Fortunately for the Department of Government Efficiency, they do have a very ambitious goal of cutting that deficit in half to down to $1 trillion. But Vance still requires Congress to get their pocketbooks under control. With the announcement yesterday, there's going to be some lingering impacts from that. Things might lag by a couple of days. Vance, you'll be tracking those details. Where can folks keep up to date with you?
Yeah, always a pleasure talking with you, Nick, and on these key issues that are going on. And everybody can find me at vanceginn.com. That's my website where you can find my newsletter. I'm also on X a lot at Vance Ginn. That's my handle there where I talk a lot about this information. And don't forget my podcast, Let People Prosper, where I bring on great guests and also every week go over what's happening in the economy. So please check that out wherever you get your podcasts.
Vance Ginn joins me this morning on the Nick Craig Show. Great analysis there from Vance. Appreciate his time, and what I'm seeing is kind of a mixed bag as it relates to the discussion and the decision yesterday from the Trump administration to go forward with these sweeping reciprocal tariffs, a bottom flat line 10% on every country. Other countries, you saw the chart from the president that have some different increases, and it's very much a mixed bag. And I got some feedback yesterday on social media, getting some comments in this morning as well. Jay Hill's commenting over on our Rumble live stream this morning saying, quote, "Tariffs scare me, but we have to give the man a chance. I know I won't pay an extra 30% in fees. Most folks won't. So it's going to either build here or stop selling." Well, and Jay Hill, absolutely. I think you do have to give this a chance, right? And I'm all for giving it a chance. But at the same time, I think it's reasonable to bring up, and it's rational to bring up some of the very real impacts, some of the very real concerns that these decisions can have. And they are real decisions, and there are real concerns associated with these tariffs. I mean, you just heard from economist Dr. Vance Ginn about it. A tariff is a tax, in this case, on the U.S. consumer. Companies, Walmart, Target, they're not going to eat the cost of increased import costs to bring products into the country. And I know, we just need to be buying and building American. Sure. I think you can chew gum and walk at the same time. We can bring back some level of American production and American manufacturing. But the fact of the matter is this, and I know this is probably not going to be a popular take with some folks, but the reality is we are not set up. We do not have an environment, a business climate that can go forward and justify all of the cheap crap that you and I consume. And that's the God's honest truth. We love cheap consumer garbage. It's what we thrive on. Don't believe me? Go look at your Amazon shopping cart. All of that stuff is coming from China. The reason that you're going on there and purchasing a grill thermometer for $6 is because it's made in China. You're not going to find one of those for $6 made in the United States. It's going to be $40 or $50. That's the world economy. That doesn't mean it's right. That doesn't mean it's good and just. Is the United States getting taken advantage of? Yes. But there was a very interesting point that Vance brought up that I haven't really heard discussed within the administration at all. And it was the idea that instead of increasing tariffs to bring production back to the United States, that's the main goal here of Trump. He says, well, hey, if you're gonna have to pay a 40% tariff to bring these goods in, open a manufacturing plant, open a manufacturing facility in the United States, and that goes away. And logically, that makes some sense. But as Vance noted, one of the ways to bring back production, bring back manufacturing to the United States is cutting out the burdensome regulation. I mean, the reason that you've seen manufacturing leave what was the manufacturing rust belt of the United States is because those states have ridiculous and overburdensome regulation and huge amounts of union control, right? Because union labor is incredibly expensive. We know this. I'm not telling you unions are bad or good. I'm just laying it out there. When you've got union folks working in a manufacturing facility, those wages are higher. And when the wages are higher, the cost of producing the good is higher. What is the end result? We know this answer. Again, you don't have to be an econ major to figure it out. When it costs more to produce a product, that means the product is going to cost more. That means when you go to the store and buy it or click online and buy it, it is going to be more expensive. And I'm not sure, and I thought Vance gave me a pretty good answer to that question, but I'm not sure that the American people currently have the ability to deal with potentially the short-term impacts on tariffs, right? Because there's short-term and long-term impacts. And the long-term impacts, we know what Trump wants to do. We know what the incentive, what the goal is. Bring more jobs, bring more manufacturing back to the United States. We know that's what he's shooting for. The question is, can that actually happen? Will that actually happen as we go down the road on this? And can the American consumer, can you and I afford to pay 30, 40, 50% more for goods right now that we're buying under some of these policies when it goes into effect coming up here on Saturday, April the 5th? Right? That's the $1 million question this morning. I wish I had a concise and great answer for you, but I don't. Because a lot of it is just unknown. But I'm seeing a lot from economists who are very much on Trump's side that are cautioning this administration. And I've seen folks on the other side saying, the same individuals that destroyed the U.S. economy are now the ones complaining about tariffs. There's plenty of that, sure. I mean, there's plenty of individuals that were responsible for the exporting of U.S. jobs. Plenty of individuals that are responsible for the $36 trillion in national debt that we have, the $2 trillion deficit that we run day in and day out, that are, of course, crying afoul over these decisions, that are complaining about what Trump did yesterday. Those individuals are there. And I don't really care what those individuals think. Right? These are the same people that decided to outsource the United States. Sure. But there's a lot of individuals that were not part of that. A lot of individuals that did not and continue to not want to see the outsourcing of American jobs. the outsourcing of our economy that are potentially kind of waving the flag here, trying to sound an early alarm saying, hey, this could end up having a pretty major impact. We've got a lot more feedback and some more details to get into this morning on this major tariff announcement yesterday from President Donald Trump. You can text in your comments live at 910-377-6425. That's 910-377-6425. Include your name and where you are texting from. Love to get your comments on the air. You can also leave those on Rumble, YouTube, or the X chat this morning where we're streaming live, or after the fact, you can head on over, encourage you to head on over to the X account and follow me over there as well. You can follow me on X at Nicholas M. Craig if you want to give me some feedback if you are a podcast listener and listening after the fact. We'll grab a quick break, get into some more of your comments and some more reaction from Liberation Day, as it's being called, yesterday in Washington, D.C. You're listening to the Nick Craig Show, streaming live on YouTube, Rumble, and X, and 24/7 wherever you get your podcasts. And welcome back to the Nick Craig Show, streaming live this Thursday morning on YouTube, Rumble, and X. Don't forget that you can get a bonus content, including daily show notes and more, by heading on over to patreon.com/Nick Craig. That's patreon.com/Nick Craig, daily show notes, as well as our monthly hangout. Those happen towards the end of each month. $5, $10 a month. You can set a custom amount as well if you believe that you are getting some value out of the program. I encourage you to head on over to patreon.com/Nick Craig. Appreciate everybody and their continued support here of the show. Well, we are getting your feedback, your reaction this morning to Donald Trump's announcement yesterday of wide sweeping tariffs across the country. He called it Liberation Day, announced a baseline 10% tariff on all imports into the United States going forward. Any country that is not under that 10% is going to have a custom amount set. Talked about Vietnam, a 46% tariff on goods coming from Vietnam. Some other countries discussed in there as well. Israel, 17% import on Israeli products that are coming into the United States as well. Costa Rica, 10% import there. China, 34%. So some pretty big numbers as we look at the potential economic impacts this morning. Your text messages at 910-377-6425. Leslie is texting in this morning. She says, one thing left out of this discussion is that we need to have certain industries in our country as a matter of national security. Steel, electronics, and medicine come to mind. This needs to be brought in country, whether tariffs or corporate tax reductions force it to happen. And I and many other Americans are uneasy about the offshore resilience on these types of items. Leslie, that's a phenomenal point. I mean, it's why you're seeing, when you talk about electronics, all of the discussions going on with the major semiconductor companies, bringing some of that semiconductor production to the United States, the vast majority of that happening right now in essentially just two places, Taiwan and China. That's where like 99% of semiconductors are being produced. Now, your entire phone, your video game tablets, your whatever it is, all of that stuff is being made. All of the semiconductors are being made in Taiwan, being made in China. And there's an attempt to bring some of that back. But I can't overstate what we heard from economist Dr. Vance Ginn over the loosening of business regulations here in the United States. Right? And we've seen a lot of that. We've got a track record of that in North Carolina. This state has lowered its corporate income tax big time over the last 15 years, since around 15 years, since the Republicans took control of the General Assembly. And what was the result of lowering those corporate income tax rates? What was the impact of lowering burdensome big business regulation in here in North Carolina? Well, we've seen the result. We've seen the impact. CNBC ranked North Carolina in 2023 and 2024, or 22 and 23, the number one state for business in the United States. Number one state. And it's not because we were giving a whole bunch of money. Now, there were some grants and things, but it's not because we were opening our hands and just giving away the farm to any company that wanted to come to North Carolina. There was some of that, but not the vast majority. It's because government lowered the business regulation. Government lowered the cost of doing business in North Carolina. And the direct result of that is more businesses wanted to come to this state. More businesses continue to want to come to North Carolina because of our very, very lucrative corporate tax rate, which, by the way, is set to be phased out over the next couple of years, down to 0. Which will be a huge boom for business. Be a huge driver for not only North Carolina's economy, but for the country's economy. Right? So we've got examples of things that can be done that do not immediately and have a direct impact on the North Carolina consumer. Right? Because as North Carolina lowered its burdensome big business regulation, as North Carolina lowered its corporate tax rate, your personal taxes didn't go up. It was actually the opposite. Corporate taxes continue to fall. Personal income tax rates continue to fall. So you and I aren't paying anything more. Our taxes are not going up, at least at a statewide level, the what you pay in terms of income tax. Now, local municipalities, that's a different discussion. But statewide, that's not happening. So states taking in less money from direct revenues from corporate income tax, but more businesses are moving here. More individuals are moving here to work for those businesses. And what's the end result? The state ends up having more money at its discretion. The state ends up having more dollars to spend as each biennium budget goes around because more people are here, more money is being spent, we're growing our economy. And most of this comes back to something that's relatively straightforward. Being fiscally responsible. And the United States just doesn't have that. I pulled up the debt clock before the break. $36.677 trillion in U.S. debt. The U.S. federal budget deficit for this year is over $2 trillion. our government is not being smart with its money. And fortunately, things are going on to change that. Fortunately, the Department of Government Efficiency looks to slash the U.S. federal budget deficit in half. Elon Musk's goal is to cut $1 trillion out of the deficit. But that's only half. The other half is going to have to come from Congress. The other half is going to have to come from lawmakers in Washington, D.C., and get their spending under control. Doge can only cut so much. There's only so many efficiencies that can be found within the government. There is still the overarching problem of out-of-control government spending. Wasteful programs, wasteful departments. Those need to be eliminated, and we're seeing that work take place right now. But it's only one piece of the puzzle. Right? It's only one thing in the equation. It's not the entire thing. There's so many different moving points with everything going on right now. You've got discussions of tariffs, which we're talking about this morning, manufacturing, bringing that back to the United States, unfair trade practices taking place between various countries and the international, trade market, the free market, if you want to call it that we live in. There's so many different pieces of the puzzle, and there's not a silver bullet. There's not a one-size-fits-all solution. But there is one thing that I know, and it's what I just discussed here in North Carolina. There is precedent. There is a track record of being smart with your money, being good stewards of public dollars, and the impact, the result that has. A more prosperous business climate and a more prosperous environment for people to live. We've seen that in our state, which I will remind you, had one of the highest the highest personal income and corporate tax rate in the entire Southeast just 20 years ago. After 100 plus years of Democrat control in this state, the state was broke and had stupidly high taxes for both businesses and individuals. Right? Because Democrats aren't worried about fiscal responsibility. Democrats are not worried about being good stewards of the U.S. dollar. They're worried about one thing and one thing only. How many pet projects can we fund? How much money can we piss away on a daily basis? That's what they're truly interested in. They've got zero interest in being smart with the money that they've got. And when they need more, they just say, well, we'll just jack up your taxes. We'll charge businesses more to operate in our state, which means less money for salaries, less money for R&D, less money for innovation. That's how the Democrats govern. And we've got examples of that here 20 years ago, 100 years of Democrat control. And so going back to the issue at hand this morning, the Liberation Day, these sweeping tariffs. Tom sent me a post on X yesterday afternoon and said, quote, saving the country and our children's future requires tough short-term decisions. The greedy and blown out DC group will pronounce, but I will take a little pain to make my kids' future over a cheaper import. Tom, I agree with your comments. And we've been talking about this as it relates to government efficiency over the last couple of weeks. That there is going to be short-term pain. There is going to be short-term effects. And those are very real. Those are going to happen. And I'm okay with short-term impacts if we're correcting the course. But as you just heard from Vance, Trump tried to do this in the first go-around. Trump tried doing this in the first administration. One of his things he tried to do was bring more steel manufacturing back to the United States. And he put massive tariffs on steel imports for the U.S. It did not have a net benefit for the steel industry. They did not produce any more steel in the United States. Actually, they produced less because some of the precursors to building steel costed so much more to come into the country. Right? It had the opposite effect of what the administration wanted. And that's my concern this morning. I agree with the message. I would love if we could produce more in the United States. I think overall that would be good for our country. Overall, I think that's a very good thing to strive and hope for. But we have got examples where that has not been the case. We've got examples where these tariffs do not cause there to be more business production here in the U.S. The price of the good skyrockets and nothing more is produced here in the U.S. Or if it is produced in the U.S., the price of it has to balloon because we don't have the ability to manufacture everything here in the U.S. There are products, there are products and precursors and various raw materials that we have to get from somewhere else. We don't have the ability to produce everything here in America. We just don't. That's the reality of living in a world where not the resources that are available are not equally placed. There are certain areas of the world that have more resources than the United States do. There are certain areas of the world where they can only grow a certain plant. Right? You go down to South America and look at the cocoa bean. Right? We don't grow cocoa beans in the United States. The environment doesn't make any sense for it. It's not practical. So we have to import that stuff. There's no way around it. You're not going to start growing mass amounts of cocoa beans in the United States. It's just not possible. Our environment does not allow it. The soil's not right. The climate's not right. It just doesn't work. Right? There's just one small example of something that is never going to be brought back to the United States. It was never here to start with. But now that's going to have tariffs on it. Depending on the South American country it's coming in from, it could have a 10 to 30% tariff. Right? How are those prices ever going to come down? There's no production of that here in the U.S. There's no physical way to make that in the United States. So what do you do with that? We have a problem right now. There's no question about it. We've got crippling national debt. We've got a situation where we are, in fact, being taken advantage of as it relates to trade. I think there are other ways to go about it besides across the board blanket tariffs on everybody. And the big one is business regulation and cost of doing business. You lower those factors, people will want to make products in the United States. You give business the opportunity to do what they're good at, which is produce a good or produce a service, they will do it. The reason that labor has been shipped off to other places, of course, not even getting into some of the labor practices of many places like China, where we get so many of our goods and our goods and products from. Not even talking about that. It's just cheaper. And whether we like it or not, we love cheap. We can bury our head in the sand, and I saw plenty of people doing this on social media yesterday. We can bury our head in the sand and act like, oh, we're okay paying more, but you're not, right? Because you can pay more right now. You can buy the U.S. equivalent good to many of the cheap Chinese crap that we buy, but nobody does. Right? You can go on Amazon and look at the top selling items. The top selling items are coming from China. There are U.S. equivalents. Nobody's buying them because we want things to be cheaper. We are trying to manage our own personal finances. We are trying to spend as little as possible to save as much money as possible so that we can either literally save it or spend it on other things. Right? That's the goal. If I spend half on something, then I've got more money to spend elsewhere or more money to save for something else. That's how we handle personal finances. Brett Baer yesterday afternoon was talking with the Secretary of the Treasury about this, and there was some discussion about prices and how that worked in the first administration. Take a listen.
And for someone who says that this money coming in is really a tax on consumers, what do you say?
I say a couple of things. One, we're seeing the CEO of Walmart is pushing back on his Chinese suppliers, and he is telling them they have to eat all the tariff increases. They're the largest retailer in America. I think 40 million Americans go into Walmart every week. We saw in Trump 1.0, prices didn't go up, and if we have that happening at the same time, we are able to use that income to provide President Trump's tax agenda. No tax on tips, no tax on Social Security, the excuse me, no tax on overtime, and making auto interest deductible for American cars, that's a home run for working class Americans.
Yeah.
And of course, that's the best case scenario, right? If Walmart's Chinese suppliers eat all of the costs on tariffs, that would be great. But I don't see that happening. There is not a chance in hell that all of these Chinese suppliers eat all of that cost. It's just not practical. They're not going to do it. And so if they're not capable of doing it, who's left to do it? Well, then Walmart itself, Target itself, whatever other business entity itself, because that's the impacts that tariffs have. That's the impact that this could and I think in large part probably will have on the economy. That's likely to be a major, major problem. Now, some of the other things, tax cuts, making those permanent. We talked with Vance about that. Getting rid of taxes on overtime, taxes on tips, all of that stuff. Those are phenomenal winning ideas. I mean, phenomenal stuff. And I think there will be some benefits that come out of Trump's announcement yesterday. No question about it. Do we want some more manufacturing in the United States? Yes. Specifically, certain elements and industries that are of grave national security. Right, we got that text in a couple of minutes ago from Leslie about that. Absolutely. My question is, what about everything else? So I think I've beaten the tariff thing with like a dead horse at this point. Here's the real question. Transitioning away from the economic side of it, which is major. Right, we went through those details with Vance. But getting rid of the economic discussion, let's talk about the political discussion. Because to me, that is very real. If prices go up, which in the short term, even the most avid Trump person, in the short term, prices will go up. That will be the result of this. Can the Republicans overcome that politically? To me, that is one of the major questions of yesterday's announcement. We've seen thus far that Trump has had a relatively good approval rating. When you add everything together, his approval rating has been very good. The American people are satisfied in most part with his leadership. Now, they don't love everything that he's doing, but his approval rating is 20 plus points higher than what Biden's was, which was hovering in the mid 30s. So American people like what's going on. They like the shakeup. They like the change. But when their paycheck starts getting affected, and we saw this under Biden. I mean, when the price of things at the grocery stores started going out of control, you saw Biden's approval numbers plummet. When you used to be able to go to the grocery store with $100 and fill up a shopping cart, and now it's $180 to buy the same amount of stuff, that had a huge impact on the American consumer. And they in turn said, these policies, this administration is not providing what we need. I can't afford to spend $200 on groceries that used to be half the price. That's not practical for me long term. And they wanted to change. So if in fact prices go up, again, I think there's strong reason to believe that is likely the case. If prices go up, can Trump withstand it politically? That to me is the major question this morning. And I asked this. I asked the question on the Nick Craig Show Facebook page yesterday afternoon. Trump announces reciprocal tariffs. Thoughts? Got some mixed responses. John saying not a fan. Joseph saying what's wrong with that. Blake commenting and saying I think it will be beneficial for some time. I do think it will only be temporary, but we will feel it a little while. We'll feel it for a little while as consumers. And I don't think there's much argument that we're going to feel the impact. And what does that look like politically for this administration? What does this look like for a president that is going to have a fight for his life as it relates to the midterm elections coming up in 2026? What does something like that look like? What do those impacts look like? If prices have skyrocketed, Republicans are dead in the water for the midterms. I mean, one of the major reasons that Trump was successful in the November election was because of the economy. Right? We looked at political polling, regardless of whether it was a statewide poll or a national political poll. We saw that jobs and or the economy, some polls put those together, some separate them. We saw that that was a major issue for the American people. That was a major issue for voters when they were deciding in November of last year which lever they were going to pull or which circle they were going to fill out on their presidential ballot. The economy was a major driving factor. Makes sense. You and I interface with the economy all day, every day. Whether you're driving around and getting gas, going out to eat, shopping, purchasing things through work or for work. I mean, you're doing it every day. Very few days go by where you're not buying or spending or paying for something, whether it's just a tank of gas or something to eat. Right? We do this each and every day. The impacts are real. The effects are real, and it's something that's felt immediately. Right? Because your salary is not going up, and it's a completely different discussion. Your salary is not going up to meet the pace of inflation. Your salary at work is not going to go up because there's now a 30% tariff on everything, 38% tariff on everything coming in for China. You have the same amount of money and everything else costs more, which means you have less money to spend, less money to put back into the economy. Well, while the goal of all of this, of course, is to grow the economy. You're buying less because things cost more. It's as simple as that. I hope that I hope that I'm dead wrong about this. I hope that many other individuals that are on the side of the president that are citing the warnings, citing the risks here, I hope we're all dead wrong about this. Now, Trump's a smart guy. Trump's got very smart people around him. The Treasury Secretary, other individuals that are leading these discussions, the economists that he's got in his administration, these are very, very intelligent people. Is this some greater plan that we just don't have, that we haven't seen fully fledged out yet? Possibly. Maybe. I'm just not sure that the political goodwill, the political capital, right? Because that's what we're talking about. The political capital that the administration has right now, the political capital that Trump has, will he be able to hold on to that for other issues that are going to be very important? Or is he going to piss all of that goodwill away with these tariffs, with these international trade wars that are being started? In politics, you need political capital. You need the ability to expend that capital. It's like a bank account. Talking a lot about money this morning, of course. You need to be able to expend that when needed, when necessary. And there's a very strong possibility that a vast majority of that political will goes by the wayside. Now, this is not something that we are going to see the end result of today. It's not necessarily even something that we're going to see the end result of in the next couple of weeks. It's something that we're going to have to watch and keep an eye on long term. Discussions are going to continue, right? We're coming up on April 9th. I think it's the 9th. There's going to be additional tariffs going in place on China. And so it's going to be a major discussion. It's something that I'm going to keep a very close eye on. We'll chat with guests. We'll get insight from individuals, and we'll bring it to you. Of course, love to get your comments as well. You can comment live as we're streaming 7 o'clock weekday mornings on YouTube, Rumble, and X. You can send messages after the fact over on X if you'd like to follow me over there, x.com/Nicholas M. Craig, or you can head on over to the website, nickcraig.com. There is a contact form right on there. You can send email and comments through the website if you'd like to get your comments read on the show, get some of those discussions talked about. Just head on over to the website. There's a contact form in there as well. You can also email me, nick@nickcraig.com or show@nickcraig.com. Love to get your feedback. This is going to be a major political discussion. We'll keep an eye on it right here. Well, that's it for a busy Thursday edition of the Nick Craig Show. Appreciate economist Dr. Vance Ginn's time. Appreciate all of the feedback and comments live and after the fact as well. That's going to do it for the Nick Craig Show on YouTube, Rumble, and X. And, of course, 24/7 wherever you get your podcasts. Have a great Thursday. We're back with you tomorrow morning right here.